Thank you, Monty. Well, we are glad to have you tonight, and we are glad to welcome Bob Chisholm to come and be our second speaker for our summer series this summer over the Beatitudes, a different kind of blessed. Bob Chisholm has been at Preston Crest since 2002. Before he came to Preston Crest, he's done a lot of things, been a lot of places. I know he has served in campus ministry in Tennessee. He was a preacher in Kansas City and also in Springfield, Missouri. Very well educated, got his education at Harding, both undergraduate and master's degrees from Harding. But what I love most about Bob was I got to sit in an office next to Bob for 6 years at Preston Crest. Bob is the spiritual formation and small groups minister at Preston Crest. And Bob ministered to me in a very dark time in my life that this church knows about. And Bob, I've told you before personally, but remind you in the presence of many witnesses, you helped me fall back in love with the Lord and faith. Bob has a deep passion for making faith real and understanding spiritual formation and the work that God wants to do in us through His Spirit. And for the last many years, I don't know how many years, but hundreds of members at Preston Crest have gone through what's called the spiritual formation journey. It's a year-long program. People meet once a week, every week for a year at 5:30 in the morning, and it goes until 7. I was privileged to do that in 2022, and it really changes you and really strengthens you. And I'm grateful to have Bob here tonight to share with us a little bit about the Sermon on the Mount, and I think you will hear from his voice tonight his love for the Lord, his love for the church, and his love for spiritual formation. So Bob, come and bless us.
Well, thank you, Jacob and Suzanne. It's great to be with you in this really amazing church. I know you have to be amazing because you took him away from us. And I told some of you this, you don't really know the real reason I'm here, do you? Don't worry, I'm not going to try to steal him back. But it's wonderful to be with you tonight. The only thing that would make this better for me is if my wife Pam were here, but she was stolen away by 2 grandgirls in Austin, and so she is down there with them. And as Jacob said, we worked together for 6 years, and we were right next to each other. I could hear him through the wall, and he doesn't know I took notes, but I wrote it all down. No, I knew the entire time that he was there that his passion was to preach. And so I'm so grateful that you found each other and that he has been here. And I think you are finding out how blessed you are to have him here. As he said, I've been at Preston Crest for 24 years. For the first 7 years, I was a preaching minister and small group minister. For the last 17, I've been the spiritual formation minister. If you go back 21 years, but prior to that, I was a preaching minister. But my very first ministry position was a campus minister, very unique. And for 10 years, I was at 2 state universities, Memphis State University and Southwest Missouri State University. And it was there at Memphis State that I met a young man named Jed. Jed was a freshman, and Jed was very positive, exciting. He was an athlete. His words were always positive. He had a great smile, and he was so excited about his new girlfriend, Mary. And I could hear it every time he talked about her. But Jed had a secret that he had hidden away. And so even though he was young, his soul was old. And he felt alone, and he felt sad, felt lost. He later told me this story, that he would even cry out loud. He would sob when he was alone, when he allowed himself to think about what was happening inside of him. Jed came to the dorm Bible study that I led in one of the dormitories. It was a 10 o'clock at night study, and some of the Christian brothers on the hall would invite their roommates or classmates or friends, and they would come to the 10 o'clock study. And usually we would be going through some portion of the life of Jesus. And Jed came to that study. And at first, he was really interested about the spiritual journey that we were talking about there. But over the course of time, Jed became very proficient at a very dangerous skill. He learned to resist God. And it seemed like that the clearer that God came into focus in his mind, the more Jed resisted. And so he was young, he was smart, he was strong, and it was like he did not want to admit that he needed this. Because young, smart, athletic people, they're not used to saying, I need anything. And it was just hard for him to admit it. And I remember a series of critical days for Jed when he was away. He was alone. We didn't know where he was. And when I did see him, it was obvious he was struggling with this journey. And he didn't come to the study one night. And I thought, well, that's it. He's probably gone. And I didn't know that he had reached a critical point, a climax, a turning point. And when the study ended that night and opened the door from the room, the student's room, back into the hallway, there was Jed sitting on the floor next to the wall, waiting. And I baptized Jed that night. He made the choice. Later, Jed taught Mary and baptized her. They have been married for 35 years now, and they attend one of the sister churches in Memphis, Tennessee. What was Jed struggling with that night in the dormitory? He was at a point of decision. He was deciding, what am I going to do? Jed was at the end of the diving board, and there was nothing left to do but either jump or to climb back down the ladder. And that was his struggle. He knew he had to make some kind of choice about this spiritual journey. And tonight I would like it if we could just put ourselves in Jed's place, Jed's struggle, our struggle, because it is a choice. We don't make it one time. We make it every day with all the little choices that we make. It was C.S. Lewis that said, everyone is either becoming a heavenly creature or a hellish creature. We're moving one way or the other. So it's a choice. And I have to choose my journey. One of my choices, we could call it the way of the cross. And one of the clearest presentations of that choice is the one y'all have been making in the summer series when Jesus gave the Beatitudes. And so I want to just start by reading all the Beatitudes. I asked Jacob if I could step out of the doing one at a time per week and just kind of give a broad perspective that has really helped me and that I'd like to share with you. And he said, absolutely, go right ahead. So here are the Beatitudes, and I'm going to put them up here for you. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is the blessing Jesus offers. And we can contrast that with the other choice that we have, which we could call the way of the crowd. And it sounds a little different, and it might go something like this. Blessed are those who have all the answers, for they will be confident and in control. Blessed are those who ignore their losses, for they will never feel pain. Blessed are those who are proud, for they will get what they deserve. Blessed are those who don't care what God wants, for they will get what they want out of life. Blessed are those who get even, for they will save face. Blessed are the schemers, for they will see their dreams come true. Blessed are the fighters, for they will be respected. Blessed are those who will do anything to fit in, for they will be well liked. Now you may have noticed, if you put those side by side, this is the exact opposite of what Jesus said is a blessing. And what I want to do tonight is try to back up and see the Beatitudes from a big picture. And to examine the spiritual journey and to get this larger picture, it has helped me to see the Beatitudes from several different vantage points. The most obvious one, let's see, I think I missed something here. Okay, pushing the wrong button. The most obvious one is to see that there are 8 of them. And we could say that there are 8 steps. And what I mean by this is I think there is a definite order to these principles. I don't think they're accidentally or haphazardly placed. I think instead there is a spiritual sequence to the Beatitudes. One builds upon the one prior to it and paves the way for the one that's following it. But we can also say that there are 4 stages. And by grouping the Beatitudes, you can see these clear stages. Admission, the first 2 Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn. Openness, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Growth, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart. And finally, ministry. Blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those who are persecuted. So 4 stages. And then by backing up even more, you can see there are 2 large sections. The first group describes people who are coming to terms with who they are, and they're beginning this spiritual journey. And the second group is describing people who are now beginning to live like the holy God that they're following. And so we have 8 steps, 4 stages, 2 sections. What I'd like to do for the rest of our time is look at these 4 stages and for us to just travel this spiritual journey. Let's follow the stages, knowing that they're going to just take us deeper into the heart of God. So first, by traveling the spiritual journey, let's begin with stage 1, a spirit of admission. Notice the first 2 Beatitudes once again. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. You see the admission that's built into those? I'm admitting where I am. I'm admitting what I need. The word poor that's used here and 34 other times in the New Testament, it means poor in comparison to rich. And so, like Luke 16, the rich man and Lazarus, or Mark chapter 12, we have the poor widow, or James chapter 2, we have the poor man at the banquet. The poor, and this is important, the poor were impoverished. They were destitute, absolutely poverty-stricken. They would not survive without help. That's what poor meant there. They had to be given to. And then think about the word spirit here, poor in spirit. He's not talking about the Holy Spirit. He's not talking about the Spirit of God. He's not talking about an evil spirit. He means the human spirit, the real you, down deep inside. Not tissue, muscles, height, weight, status, power, looks. No, all that's going to go to dust at the end of time. And what will be left is the real you inside, your spirit. So, poor in spirit. My spirit is destitute without help. So what is Jesus saying? Where do I have to begin? He's saying we must begin by really knowing that we cannot transform our own lives. We cannot forgive our own guilt. We cannot create our own purpose. We don't even know how to explain our own death. We're poor. We're destitute. We're dependent. Now, given the fact that we live where we do, I've got to ask, how difficult is it to believe that when everything around us is saying, no, you look somewhere else. Look at your health. Look at your income. Look at your home. Look at your investments. Look at your job. Look at your status. Look at what you drive. Look at where you live. That's where you look. Because see, as long as if I look there, and in my mind I'm trying to scotch tape meaning and happiness onto my life, Jesus is saying, no, you don't find it that way, and you never will. It begins with a spirit of admission. Now, when this spirit of admission begins to well up inside of me and stick in my throat, Jesus says something will happen. He says, you'll begin to mourn. When I have faced my poverty, spiritual poverty, my failure, I'll begin to mourn. That's what happened to Jed. And he struggled with it. He couldn't face it until he couldn't not face it. In our world, Jesus describes it in a way that sounds kind of odd to our world. Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn. Now, in some translations, this comes out looking really strange, especially for those who try to insert the word happy for the word blessed. Happy are they that mourn just doesn't sound right. Happy are the ones who cry. Happy are those who grieve. Happy are the unhappy. No, we need to put it back in its spiritual sequence. And we won't understand the blessing of mourning, verse 4, until I see where it came from the poor in spirit, verse 3. If I'm not mourning, I need to back up and examine my life more carefully. It's part of the spirit of admission. Jesus is saying that the kingdom belongs to those who realize their spiritual destitution. Is it any wonder that every treatment program starts with blessed are the poor in spirit? You go to Alcoholics Anonymous, any drug abuse program, what's the very first step? It's admission. You're not going to even start the program if you're not admitting. And I'm not going to start Jesus' program without admitting. I have to know I can't make it on my own. And what happens when I follow this level of personal honesty is mourning. And where there is no mourning, there is no blessing. And where there is no sorrow, there is no calm. Where there is no facing bad news, there's no understanding of good news. Someone asked me if I had any hobbies. We talked about my family name with several people, and I have one hobby, and it's my family name, Chisholm. And yes, some of y'all asked me, I am related to the Chisholm Trail. And so there's a little bit of cowboy in there. And so I collect a few books and a few maps about Jesse Chisholm and even John Chisholm. But that hobby has helped me. I didn't know this was going to happen, but I drifted into a second hobby, and that's cowboy poetry. Yes, there is such a thing. Working cowboys today, they write poetry. And they gather once a year in a Holiday Inn in Nevada or in North Dakota, once a year, and they recite their poems to each other. And then somebody will gather it together, and it's been published from year to year, and I collect those. And so I say all that to say, I would like to read you a cowboy poem. And it's not long, don't worry. It's by Waddy Mitchell, who's probably one of the better known ones. Out on the cliff's edge, further than he's ever been before, he sat with legs a-dangling high above the valley's floor. He was lost in thought while drinking in the grandeur of it all when a gust of wind unseated him and he began to fall. 'Twas a drastic situation, and he didn't dare think slow, for certain death awaited in the rocky crags below. So he called upon a friend, I guess the only one he could, the one we all forget about when things are going good. He said, God, if you will help me now, I'll quit my sinful ways. I'll do the things you'd have me do and work hard all my days. I'll quit the booze and cigarettes and help my loving wife. I'll spend time with my children, and I'll turn around my life. I'll work to help the needy, and I promise to repent. Just then, a tree limb caught his coat, and stopped his fast descent. And while hanging from the tree that grew upon that rocky shelf, he looked skyward and said, "Never mind, I've handled it myself." Now, I read you the poem so I could tell you the title of the poem. The title of the poem is Typical. Typical. Corrie ten Boom once said, "Is God going to be your steering wheel or your spare tire?" Jesus is saying, I've got to begin by knowing I can't make it. The blessed person is one who has faced their failure, they're deeply sorry, and now they are meek. That's the second in the spiritual journey. It's a spirit of openness. Look at verses 5 and 6. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. So after facing my failure and becoming deeply sorry, I become meek. Now, don't get tripped up by the word meek. It rhymes with weak. It's nothing like it. Meek means receptive. It means teachable. They have the spirit of openness. They're open to God. In fact, Jesus says that they're so open, they become hungry for God. They hunger and thirst for righteousness. You know, not long ago, I passed by a place where no one had eaten anything for years. It's called a cemetery because the dead are not hungry. Now, contrast that with a newborn baby. Their hunger is audible. They want everybody to know they're hungry. They cry out for food. They cry out for attention. They cry out for comfort. In fact, everything that's living hungers and thirsts. Interesting but maybe unimportant fact here, I read that a beech tree can take up to 65 gallons of water in a single summer day. It's alive, and it's hungry and thirsty. I also read this definition of a young boy. A young boy is an appetite with skin stretched over it. Hunger is a sign of life. And that brings us to the spirit of openness. It says, teach me, fill me, feed me. I hunger for you, God. That's where this appetite comes from. Now, I want to dig a little deeper here because we can misunderstand what it means to be hungry. You remember the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15. When he was hungry, he thought of what? I'm hungry. And what began to look attractive to him? It's what the pigs were eating. But when he was starving, who did he think of? My Father. My Father. And you can hear him working through these stages. He went through the stage of admission, facing and mourning his failure. He went through the stage of openness, desperately wanting changes. And you know when that openness came to him? In verse 17, it says, he came to his senses. What does it take for you and for me to come to my senses, to hunger for God? I ask that because a lot of people are religiously involved just enough to satisfy their guilt, but not their hunger. Not their hunger. You see, guilt is addressed in the first beatitude, poor in spirit. Guilt is addressed in the second beatitude, mourning. But it's the third and fourth beatitude to take the next step. Because if I've really faced my failure, blessed are the poor in spirit. And if I'm really sorry for that, blessed are those who mourn. And I'm becoming open to change, blessed are the meek. Then my hunger, Jesus said, is for righteousness. It's a higher hunger. It's an insatiable appetite for what is right. Because don't forget, Jesus who taught us to pray for our daily bread, he also said, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Matthew 4, verse 4. We have a God hunger. And that brings us to the third stage. As we travel the spiritual journey, we have a spirit of admission, a spirit of openness, and it brings to us a spirit of growth. Look at verses 7 and 8. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And it's here that we turn the corner. The first four Beatitudes describe a life that is humbled before God and learning from God. The last four Beatitudes take that same life, they describe the same life now being changed by God and used by God. And I think it's easy to see how the first four Beatitudes bring a person to the point that the last four make sense. And so the question I had to ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think Jesus is saying, do you want to be like God? He wants to take you there. Blessed are the merciful. That is God. Blessed are those who show mercy. That is God. I once heard Dallas Willard speak, and he said, he described heaven in a way I'd never thought of before. He said, heaven is an acquired taste. Think about that. It's an acquired taste. And then he said, no one will go that doesn't want to. I'm thinking, well, who doesn't want to go there? And he went no further to say, if you do not enjoy here mercy, kindness, compassion, generosity, love, forgiveness, why in the world would you want to go there? That's all that's there. That's who God is. If I don't want to be merciful, if I want to be vengeful here, why do I want to go there? God is kind and compassionate. He's wanting us to be merciful like him. Now, I realize there may be some here tonight who might struggle with the practice of mercy, showing it to people. But I guarantee you there is no one here that cannot relate to the need for mercy. We all need it. And God shows it every day. Did you know that every single day God feeds more than 8 billion ungrateful people? He gives them gravity, he gives them food, he gives them sunlight, he gives them water, he gives them opportunity, he gave them existence. And most of them haven't given him a thought. He gives them a lifespan to find him and turn their lives over to him. That's who God is. Can I not be more like him? It's only when we become aware of our need for mercy that we will then become merciful. Now, like all the other principles, mercy can also be misunderstood. Mercy is not getting a warning instead of a ticket. That's not mercy. Mercy is not getting an extra day on a school project. That's not mercy. Mercy is not getting an extension on a late bill. No, mercy is not giving someone more time to handle their own problems by themselves. Just leave me out of it. I'll give you some more time. No, mercy is becoming a part of their problem. It's stepping into their need. It's feeling their pain, feeling their hurt. That's what Jesus did. What did Jesus say to the Father about the people who were nailing him to a cross? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That's him. The merciful get involved. I have a good friend who had an older lady that lived in his neighborhood, and she had no family, or at least she lived in a home that was pretty run down. The yard was in bad need of work. And so he just befriended her. And he would go over and he would visit. He did her yard work. He would run errands. He did some home repair. He befriended her. And tragically, one day, her house burned to the ground. And it was just a soggy mess. That's all that was there. But she wanted to just look for something that may be left. So he invited one of his friends to join him, and they spent an afternoon with her just looking, hours of looking. And his friend that he brought just got more and more frustrated. And finally, he voiced his frustration. He said, "We've been looking for hours, and we have not found a thing." To which my friend said, "You don't understand. I know we're not going to find anything. We're not doing this to find anything. She doesn't need us to find anything. She needs us just to look with her." That's mercy. That's the mercy of God. And it was growing in my friend's life, and he was trying to pass it on to his friend. But mercy is not the only thing that God is doing in life. Look at verse 8 again. "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." It becomes immediately obviously that the words "in heart" tells us what kind of purity that Jesus is talking about. It's in the heart. It's inside. It's not cosmetic. It's not external. It's internal. It's as I open myself up, the heart, the deepest part of my life, to the only one that can shape my heart is God. I heard this definition of love. It said love is the most powerful and the most powerless emotion. It's the most powerful, it's because it's the only thing that can change the human heart. It's the most powerless because it can do nothing except by consent. God wants to change my heart, but only if I consent and let him in. So admission, openness, growth, and finally traveling the spiritual journey, God forms in us a spirit of ministry. Look at verses 9 and 10. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And so as we go through this process, as we move from a spirit of admission to openness, to growth, and come to ministry, because God is bringing peace to the war that's inside of us. And at the same time, he is equipping us to bring that peace to other people. And so as we find our own internal peace, we are becoming peacemakers. And becoming peacemakers puts us right into God's mission. And you know where that takes us? We step right back into the war zone. Where is peace needed? It's needed in the middle of the fight. It's needed in the war. How did Jesus put it in the last beatitude? Blessed are the persecuted. Have you ever seen people in conflict and you tried to step in to help and both sides turned on you? And so are you tempted to say, "Hey, that's their problem. I'm staying out of it. I'm not going to help anybody anymore. I'm just going to turn my eye. If there's a problem, I'm not going to help. It just gets me in trouble." Well, what if Jesus said, "You know, God, I don't think I'm going to go to earth. They'll probably kill me." No. God's style is to get involved. And the scripture says in Philippians 2, Jesus emptied himself, became one of us. Hebrews said he had to be made like his brothers in every way. He became one of us. That's the spirit of ministry. It's all part of the spiritual journey. So, what can we learn from this? There's so many lessons, but I'd like to leave you with just 4 simple spiritual journey lessons. The first one, spiritual journey is not something we do. It's not my accomplishment. If it's my accomplishment, I'm right on the cusp of arrogance and pride. It's not bragging. What did Jesus say in the Sermon on the Mount later? He said, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. It's just you and God. It's not my accomplishment. It's not what I do. It's something I become because of what God is doing in my life. Secondly, those who follow the spiritual journey are meek, but not weak. We typecast that word meek as someone who has no opinion, no conviction, no direction. They're off in a corner somewhere afraid to get involved. Nothing could be further from the truth. Meek does not mean weak, lifeless, timid, afraid. Probably the best word to choose is teachable. I want this from you, God. This is a person who's given the hammer and chisel to God and said, make me into whatever you want me to be. A third lesson, the spiritual journey, is it creates a hunger that can never be satisfied. Notice what Jesus did not say. He did not say, blessed are those who achieve righteousness. No, blessed are those who hunger for it. You see, I don't push away from the table of God saying, man, I'm full. I don't think I can have another bite. Now, at dinner tonight, I was about ready to push away from that table, Jacob and Suzanne, and say, okay, I've had enough. Not God's table. I never push away from God's table. We stay at the table. We want to be there because we always hunger for God. There's so much more of him to find. And then finally, a fourth lesson. The spiritual journey takes me right back into the war zone. Satan is spreading the seeds of war. I have two good friends, Dan and Brenda McVeigh. They were missionaries in West Africa for probably 27, 30 years. But they had to come home because Dan kept getting malaria. I didn't even know they were home until I ran into them at the Pepperdine lectureships. They were going through reverse culture shock. You know, when you go from one culture to another, it's culture shock. Often when you come home, it's even harder. And they were going through that. They were describing it to me, and Brenda said this. She said, you know, Bob, there's not a single person on the continent of Africa who doesn't know that there's a spiritual war going on. But in America, no one gives it a thought. We don't know he's out there. Satan is spreading the seeds of war. And a son and a daughter of God becomes a peacemaker. Healed with and at peace with yourself and with God, I walk back into the war zone. And I involve myself in another person's pain, another person's problem. You know, I used to think that the Beatitudes ended with the spirit of ministry. Now I say they lead to the spirit of ministry, and there is no end. And the reason I do is this last question I'll leave you with. And you may have thought of this. There was some time before I did. Who did Jesus address the Sermon on the Mount to? It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And somewhere along the way it was explained to me that the mountain is where Jesus stood. It put him above the audience, and there was this amphitheater effect, and he needed to be higher so he could reach all those crowds. The sermon does end in chapter 7 with the crowds were amazed at what he said, but who did he primarily direct it to? Well, look at the first two verses of Matthew 5 again. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. I believe the Sermon on the Mount was primarily given to the 12. And the Beatitudes, and all through chapters 5, 6, and 7, Jesus is leading the 12 into ministry. Read the Sermon on the Mount. It is filled with ministry principles. How do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with a difficult marriage? It's filled with it. And Jesus is going to pass the baton of ministry on to those 12. So it leaves me with the question, Where do I see myself? Am I at the spirit of admission? I'm now admitting I need God. Am I at the end of that diving board? Am I going to make the choice to jump or to climb away? Am I a spirit of openness? I'm saying, God, I want you to teach me. Take me further. A spirit of growth. Is God changing my heart inside? In ministry, spirit of ministry. Am I ready to step into difficult places to help people? So I don't know where you are. If you are especially at the spirit of admission, then this is the time, this is the day, this is an evening. You can make a choice. Admit and take the steps. If you are needing a spirit of openness, and I need to have some teaching and some help, this church wants to help you. But whatever your need is, let us know, and we'll offer the prayers, we'll offer the help, we'll offer the counsel. Thank you for being here. Let's stand together and worship God.